Lucas here for Trickstuff. Let's bleed Piccola C22. First off, we'll take out the brake pads to avoid any contamination and place them somewhere, maybe not on your workbench, just to avoid putting drops of oil on them. And keep the small parts separate. Next up, you can use either flat wrench or your Triple-B tool and push your brake pistons back. Avoid using leverage, but rather push your brake pistons back parallelly. So if anything starts getting crooked, just start over. There's not really much that you can do wrong here. Next up, we'll put our brake pump into the bleeding position. This means opening the clamp using a 2.5 mm hex and turning everything facing vertically up. Before we start the bleeding procedure, we'll put the bleed block into the caliper and secure it with your pad retaining bolt. Next up, we'll prepare 2 syringes from your bleed kit. You'll need one tip with the M4 adapter and one tip with the M5 adapter. Fill them halfway up with Bionol. And then it's time to remove the dust cap from the caliper. You'll need a Torx 10 for this. Put it aside. And then we can take the M4 syringe, put it into the caliper. That one can wait. Next up, we'll take our pump and use the same Torx 10 to open the bleed port on your brake pump. And we can insert the M5 bleeding adapter with the syringe. To start the bleeding procedure, we'll need the 7 mm open-end wrench and open our caliper bleeding valve. Just quarter of a turn will do. And now we can start the bleeding procedure. In the beginning, I like to push the fluid from the caliper to the pump and then reverse. And you can always add negative pressure on the receiving syringe and positive pressure to the one giving fluid. This increases the flow rate and makes bleeding a lot easier. When bleeding, always take a good look that your syringes are facing upwards. This way, trapped air will not enter the system. If you do it like this, then well, you're not really bleeding it, you're airing your brakes. You repeat this process for as long as it takes to get rid of all the bubbles. Usually it's just 2 or 3 pushes from top to bottom and reverse, and then we're already good. To finish things up, at the caliper, we'll start by pushing most of the fluid from the caliper syringe to the top, and then we can just close the bleed valve by hand already, and then use the 7 mm open-end wrench, 3 Newton meters, to close the bleeding valve off. And now we can concentrate on the pump. For the pump, I will pull the plunger up, down, up, down, up. And in the end, super important, the last push always needs to be down. That's it. Now, because I still have my bleed block in and my bleed valve is closed, I can already check my bite point and confirm whether it's tight and yeah, feeling good. If all of this process didn't lead to the desired result, then we'll have to do another extra bleeding step on the caliper, but this should only rarely be the case. So I'll get rid of my bleed block now, put it aside, and now I'll take my open-end wrench, insert that into my caliper where the disc would usually go, and then I can just press on the plunger or use my brake pump to move the caliper pistons out. If you keep your open-end wrench in the caliper, your caliper pistons shouldn't be able to fall out. Just be a little bit careful during this step. In the next step, we will open the bleed valve again. Another quarter turn does the trick. And now I will pull a vacuum on my caliper syringe. You'll see a few bubbles coming out. And now is the time when you push your caliper pistons back. As before, use your open end wrench parallelly if you use this tool, or you can use your Triple-B tool. If you're performing this procedure on the back of your bike, on your rear caliper, then make sure to detach it from your frame and hang it loosely just from the brake line so that it's vertical. This way all the internal channels are pointing upwards, and bleeding is very simple this way. Now that we push all the caliper pistons back, that means that we can reinsert our bleed block to make sure that we are not overfilling our brakes. Then, just like we did before, I can push all the fluid from the top to the bottom and back. This way we have evacuated all of the possible air pockets in our caliper. That means all of the air that might have been entrapped in the system must now be either in the syringe or somewhere in the brake line. What I'm doing now is just flushing out the brake line, so I'm pushing oil from the bottom to the top. Close your caliper again. 3 Newton meters. And now we can check our bite point again. Lovely. This means that I can now finish the top off by just doing this push and pull motion 2-3 times till there's no more air bubbles showing. Then in the end, as stated before, little push on the top does the trick. Now comes the part that might leave a few traces of oil, so make sure that your brake pads and your brake discs are already in a safe distance. Little push at the top, and then I just open up the syringe. If you put this just a scarf around it, then basically there should be no oil contamination on the rest of your bike. And to finish things off, make sure that the O-ring on your bleed screw is looking good and that there's no deformations or any cuts or something like that on it. If so, replace it. If not, you can put it back in and torque it down. Use a rag to soak up the rest of the oil that might still be near the bleeding port. Then the pump is already done. To finish up the caliper, we take the 7mm open end wrench, 3 Newton meters for the bleed valve, and then we will open our syringe, open it 1 turn roundabout, and then pull a little. This way you will suck all of the rest of the oil out of the bleeding valve, and there will be no traces of oil left. Leaves you with a lot of air in your syringe. And now's the time when you put your dust cap in. There's no seal needed on this one. This just takes the Torx 10 and 1 to 1.5 Newton meters of torque. That's it. This does not seal anything. This just prevents any dirt from coming in. The weight weenies can leave this off. Bite point feels good. Make sure to give your brake a good rub down with a lot of clean water and dish soap. That's enough. You don't need any fancy brake cleaners or anything like that. Just use regular dish soap and a lot of water to rinse it off in the end. After bleeding, take a 2.5mm hex key, open your band clamp, screw, and bring your brake pump back to your riding position. Then you can tighten this one back up. Do not exceed 2 Newton meters. You can just apply that much torque that your brake pump doesn't turn around your handlebar easy anymore. After bleeding, it's the right time to give your brake a final shake-up. This means that we'll have our bleed block still inserted in the caliper, and now I can, for one, check my bite point. Checking bite point like this is always better than using your brake disc and your brake pads, because they can cause distortions in the system that then feel a little bit more spongy or softer. This means hydraulics wise, you best check your bite point by using a bleed block. And now I can pump my brake for 3 solid times and then hold it. I'll hold this high pressure in my system now for 30 seconds. During this time, I can inspect all of my brake visually and check for any oil exits. I can also pay close attention to the finger force required. If the finger force drops or if any oil exits somewhere, you can, for example, check the manuals that we have online for those checkups, or go to our customer support and contact them. This one's fine. Last steps. We will remove the bleed block and take good care that your caliper is now oil free, because this is the last step where you can ruin your brakes when you have oily fingers now and take your clean brake pads back into your system. Take your pad retaining bolt, put it in, torque it down, and do not forget your C-clip for the end. And basically that's it. This procedure is quite straightforward and nothing too complicated. Go ahead, try it yourself. If anything shows up in the middle of the process and you get unsure, you can always just contact our customer support and we'll help you out. That's it.